Have you ever noticed how we treat our bodies exactly like our smartphones? We keep 50 apps open in the background, ignore the low battery warning, constantly run on high performance mode, and just expect everything to function perfectly. But eventually, the operating system starts to lag. Today, we are looking at that operating system. We are diving deep into the architecture of our hormonal health across the three most critical decades of our lives: our 30s, 40s, and 50s.
That is such a perfect metaphor. Because just like a smartphone, the glitches do not usually start with the hardware, they start deep within the code. For us, that code is our hormonal and metabolic network. There is this massive misconception right now, a sort of cultural obsession with the idea of randomly balancing hormones. People treat it like a mystical dial they can just turn up or down with a trendy supplement. But true health intelligence is not about chasing arbitrary hormone levels. It is about tracking the physiological systems that inevitably shift as we age. We are talking about the intricate dance between sex hormones, insulin sensitivity, thyroid function, cortisol rhythms, and how all of that dictates the survival of our muscle and bone.
It is a complete paradigm shift. We are so conditioned to fight aging cosmetically, yet we completely ignore what is happening metabolically until something breaks. Let us start with the 30s. This is a fascinating decade because culturally, you are supposed to be in your prime. You are building your career, maybe starting a family. On the surface, you feel invincible, but underneath, the cracks are starting to form, are they not?
Absolutely. The 30s are what we call the baseline building decade. Biologically speaking, your hormonal foundation is actually still quite robust, but this is the exact moment where the modern lifestyle starts acting like malware in the system. We are talking about chronic poor sleep, relentless psychological stress, and diets heavy in ultra-processed foods. Your body is resilient, but it is constantly fighting off this environmental pressure.
So we are essentially borrowing energy from our future. What does that biological debt look like in real time?
For women, that debt often manifests as subtle but disruptive changes in their cycle. They might experience intensified PMS, unexpected fertility hurdles, or early signs of conditions like PCOS. Their systems are highly sensitive to stress. For men, the story is a bit different but equally alarming. We see a gradual decline in testosterone. But here is the crucial nuance. This is not always just natural aging. Modern lifestyle factors, weight gain, alcohol consumption, and chronic sleep deprivation are heavily driving this endocrine disruption. Men are essentially suppressing their own vitality.
That is a terrifying thought. We are poisoning our own well. It is not that the body is failing, it is that the environment we put it in is too toxic. So if the 30s are about building the baseline, how do we actually measure the damage before it becomes irreversible?
You have to look under the hood with precision. Stepping on a bathroom scale tells you nothing. You need to track fasting insulin, not just glucose, because insulin rises long before blood sugar does. You should be looking at your lipid panel, specifically ApoB, to gauge cardiovascular risk. Check your thyroid function, vitamin D, and ferritin. For men experiencing symptoms, checking morning total and free testosterone is key. For women, cycle regularity is a vital sign in itself.
And the antidote? I am guessing it is not a detox tea.
Far from it. The 30s are your golden window to prevent insulin resistance and preserve muscle mass. The intervention is structural. Prioritize strength training 3 times a week. Incorporate Zone 2 cardio to build mitochondrial health. You need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, morning sunlight to set your circadian rhythm, and adequate protein at every single meal. You are literally building the metabolic armor you will need for the next 20 years.
Which brings us perfectly to the 40s. If the 30s are about building the baseline, the 40s feel like the decade where the check engine light suddenly flashes red on the dashboard.
The signal decade. That is the exact term for it. Suddenly, you realize that stress has become biologically expensive. In your 20s, you could pull an all-nighter, eat terrible food, and be fine the next afternoon. In your 40s, a poor night of sleep or a few extra drinks ruins your recovery for half the week. Your sleep becomes fragile and belly fat seems to appear out of nowhere.
Why is recovery suddenly so hard? What is happening on a cellular level that makes us so vulnerable to things we used to brush off?
It is a profound transition. For women, this is the era of perimenopause. Estrogen and progesterone do not just quietly fade away, they fluctuate wildly before menopause actually hits. It is a chaotic hormonal symphony. This fluctuation disrupts the sleep architecture, triggers hot flashes, causes mood swings, and significantly blunts physical recovery. And society often gaslights women during this time, telling them they are just stressed, when in reality, they are going through a massive neurological and endocrine shift.
That is such an important point. It is a physiological event, not a psychological weakness. And what is the male equivalent during the signal decade? I imagine the illusion of eternal youth shatters pretty quickly for them too.
It does. Men see a continued, often steeper decline in testosterone, but again, it is heavily exacerbated by central adiposity, that's stubborn belly fat overtraining, and chronic stress. In the 40s, recovery goes from being a passive background process to an active asset you have to manage like an investment portfolio.
So the strategy has to evolve. We cannot just push harder, we have to push smarter. What should we be tracking now?
You keep all the metrics from your 30s, but you add waist circumference and blood pressure. You check your LPA at least once, which is a massive genetic marker for heart disease. You watch your heart rate variability, or HRV, which tells you how well your nervous system is recovering. The actions change too. You have to fiercely protect your sleep timing. You must cut out late-night eating to give your gut and insulin a break. Strength training remains vital, but now you must add mobility work. You have to manage alcohol and caffeine with extreme caution. You are no longer invincible. You are a high-performance machine that requires meticulous maintenance.
It sounds like the 40s are a strict audit of how well you lived your 30s, which leads us to the 50s. If we survive the audit, what is next? Is it a cliff or a new plateau?
The 50s are the ultimate test of resilience. The hormonal shifts here are profound, permanent, and they strongly dictate your trajectory for the rest of your life. For women, early in this decade, menopause usually becomes official, which is defined clinically by a full 12 months without a cycle. This means a significant systemic drop in estrogen. And estrogen is not just about reproduction, it is deeply protective of bone density, cardiovascular health, body composition, and brain function. When it drops, the risk profile for heart disease and osteoporosis changes entirely.
So the stakes are incredibly high. It is no longer about looking good in a swimsuit. It is about maintaining the structural and cognitive integrity of your body.
Precisely. And for men, while there is no sudden cliff like menopause, the gradual decline in testosterone continues. But here is a critical medical nuance. Low testosterone alone does not always mean you need intervention unless there are clear clinical symptoms. The focus for both men and women in their 50s must shift aggressively toward preserving what they have: muscle, bone, brain, and cardio-metabolic health.
How do we measure that preservation? Are we still just looking at blood work?
Blood work is still foundational, but you need to look at the physical architecture. You need a DEXA scan to track bone density and exact body composition. You need to know your VO2 max, which is arguably the single greatest predictor of longevity. You track your resting heart rate.
And the actions? I assume strength training is still on the menu.
It goes from being a good idea to being absolutely non-negotiable. Muscle is your metabolic currency as you age. You need to combine resistance training with balance work to prevent falls. You need to hit high protein targets up to 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight if your kidneys are healthy to prevent muscle wasting. Sleep regularity is paramount. And interestingly, things like meditation, breath work, and deep social connections become measurable biological imperatives for managing cortisol.
What about hormone therapy? It seems like it has been a taboo subject for so long, but the science is clearly evolving.
It is evolving rapidly. For women experiencing significant disruptive menopausal symptoms, menopausal hormone therapy is a highly effective, valid medical tool when prescribed appropriately. It is time to have a serious, evidence-based conversation with a qualified clinician rather than suffering in silence.
It is a profound paradigm shift. We are moving away from this frantic, obsessive need to fix our hormones and instead focusing on measurable functional health, insulin sensitivity, cardiovascular protection, and muscle preservation.
Exactly. To summarize the entire journey, your 30s build the baseline, Your 40s reveal the true cost of your stress, and your 50s test your ultimate biological resilience.
It leaves us with a deeply philosophical question to ponder. Are we designing our daily lives to support our biology, or are we just forcing our biology to try and survive our modern lives? Every meal, every hour of sleep, every time we pick up a weight, we are literally writing the code for the body we will inhabit tomorrow.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The power is not in a magic pill. The power is in the daily choices, the intelligent tracking, and the consistency over decades.
A perfect place to leave it. The invisible clock is always ticking, but how it keeps time is entirely up to us. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next deep dive into the mechanics of human health.